Episode 8.
Welcome to the Live Fit podcast with your host, Glenn Johnson. Today you will learn techniques for permanent weight loss and improved overall health.
Thank you for listening to the Live Fit podcast, Episode 8. Today I have clinical psychologist and author of emotional eating books, Dr. Ed Abramson. But first I'd like to thank you all for subscribing and leaving reviews. I have 3 more 5-star reviews I'd like to give a shout out to. Fish9, Yan BSP, and Aaron River. I really appreciate you taking the time to leave some reviews, as it really helps the rankings for the show in the iTunes new and noteworthy section. You can find show notes and articles at livefitonline.net. Last week I asked you a question: what percentage of people drop out of a new exercise program within the first 6 weeks? The answer to that is 60%. And that's pretty sad, because that means only 40% of the people that start a new exercise routine this week will still be at it come Valentine's Day. So what can you do about it? Well, that's my job, and I really hope to help people live fit and keep their momentum going through Valentine's Day, through Labor Day, through Memorial Day, and this time again next year. I'm going to keep this short because I want to get right to our interview with Dr. Abramson. He's the author of Body Intelligence, which is a book that I found when I was looking for resources for my weight management health improvement program, and I love this book. It was a great resource. A lot of my material came from that. A lot of my knowledge came from that. But his most recent book is called It's Not Just Baby Fat. And this book will help parents raise children with healthy, non-emotional eating behaviors. Let's hear the interview with Dr. Ed Abramson. Okay, well, thank you for joining me, Dr. Abramson. I really became interested in you when I first found your book, Body Intelligence. I was browsing through the books at Powell's, and I was putting together a weight management program. And I found your book, and it really hit home to me. I was really impressed with the contents of it. The title got my attention, but I really liked what you had to say. Before we go into that, maybe you can give us a little brief background of your history and what brought you up to the point where you are now.
Yeah, I'm a clinical psychologist in Lafayette, California, but for many years I was a professor of psychology at Cal State Chico, and I ran an outpatient hospital-based eating and weight program. And so a lot of the examples in my books come from my work in that program. But in addition, I've done several, maybe about 20 published scientific studies on eating issues and emotional eating and eating disorders. So I've been involved in this area for quite a while, and currently I'm writing a blog for Psychology Today magazine. The blog is called It's Not Just Baby Fat, which is also the title of my most recent book. Wow,
that's fantastic. I do want to talk to you a little bit about that book a little bit later, but I do want to focus on Body Intelligence right at first, because it does have so much to do with emotional eating. But first, I just want to give a little shout out to Chico State. As I mentioned to you before, I'm an alumni of Chico, of the town and the school.
Yeah, it's a fun place.
It is great. I miss it a lot. Seems like everybody has a connection with Chico State. There's probably only 3 layers of separation between most people in Chico State, I found.
Either that or Sierra Nevada beer, one or the other.
That's right. So my first question is, how did you become interested in emotional eating?
It's kind of an interesting problem. I mean, on one hand, I have a personal interest in it because I was overweight as a kid. I wore husky clothes, and earlier on when I was a younger adult, I weighed about 20 pounds more than I weigh now. So it's been a personal issue for me. But then in graduate school, I was looking for a dissertation topic, and I found a professor who had a grant, and so I started doing research on anxiety and eating. And I became fascinated with it, and that's something that I just stuck with. I'm still trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of problems out there. And I remember a conversation I had once at my wife's work, and some people were standing around, and I thought they were joking, but I found out later that they were serious. We were talking about emotional eating, and they were kind of laugh around. Oh, I don't emotionally. I only eat when I'm happy. If I'm sad, I don't eat at all. And go to Celebration, or it's a Friday, and I'm laughing, and they're kind of laughing, and I thought they were in on the joke that happy is an emotion as well as sad.
Happy is an emotion too. Sure, people sometimes use food when they're in a good mood, and the idea is that the food will intensify the happy feelings, or perhaps prolong them and make them last longer. But that's emotional eating as well. It's not just negative emotions that trigger the urge to eat.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people don't really recognize, is that happy and sad and all these other emotions are still emotions. And one thing I'm wondering is, do you have any sort of data or statistics, or what can you tell me about how many people have emotional eating issues to the point where it is a weight or health issue?
Well, in general, something like probably close to 100% of women will eat emotionally at some time. Men, less likely, maybe only 70%. Now, most of the time, it doesn't really, it's not helpful if you're trying to watch your weight or if you're on a diet, to eat emotionally. But by itself, that's not really a type of psychopathology. But when it becomes out of control, then it's classified as a binge, and that can be part of either bulimia nervosa or a new disorder that's in the current version of the psychiatric diagnostic manual called binge eating disorder. And there the numbers are, far fewer. Probably somewhere around 4 or 5% of the population will have qualified for binge eating disorder, and maybe 1 or 2% for bulimia nervosa.
Interesting. How are these issues started? My thought is childhood.
Yeah, well, for most people, we can trace back if we look at what our experiences were in early childhood. I mean, parents use food as a reward. If you fall off your bicycle and skin your knee, maybe mom or dad buys you an ice cream cone to make you feel better. And if we go back even earlier in childhood, it may be the case that, when an infant cries, it may not be crying because it's hungry. It may be crying because it's cold, or it needs its diaper changed, or it's afraid of something. But yet mom or dad hears the cries and then may be inclined to soothe the child with food. So if that's the case, then the child basically learns that whenever, something is distressing, food makes it feel better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what can we do about it? So we're an adult and we're having weight issues, and you conquered it yourself, or maybe at least for the most part. You said you still are.
Partially.
You said you're still working on it, which is understandable. But what can my listeners take from this? And of course, you want them to read your book, Body Intelligence. So don't give away the punchline. But
unfortunately, there's not a single punchline. If there was, I would be happy to give it away. There are many punchlines. I think that the first thing that one needs to do is to become aware of the specific pattern. My emotional eating may be different from your emotional eating. Some people, when they're depressed, they lose their appetite and nothing tastes good. Other people, when they're depressed, that's when all hell breaks loose and they start eating everything in sight. So I think the first thing to recognize is the pattern, and it may be that it's more likely to occur, let's say after dinner when you're watching TV, or maybe in the afternoon when you have some free time on your hands, or something like that. So, being aware of your pattern is kind of the first step, and then sometimes that's enough. Sometimes, people can identify the pattern and then say, I'm really not hungry, I'm just kind of sad and I need to make myself feel better. Or I'm really not hungry, I'm stressed out and I need to mellow and calm and take a deep breath and relax rather than eat. Not always, but occasionally just knowing the pattern is sufficient. But it's kind of a prerequisite. You got to identify what your unique pattern is.
That's tough sometimes. I've had a lot of people ask me these questions, and they say, they really can't find these patterns. Is it always? I guess there's no such thing as always, but do you find people can find these issues on their own, their patterns on their own, or maybe do they need outside sources?
There are some techniques. I have a book called Emotional Eating, and I've got some specific suggestions in there. The most common emotions to trigger eating, in addition to happiness, which we already talked about, are stress or anxiety, depression, sadness, anger, boredom, loneliness. And you can keep a log, which helps. You don't have to write down everything that you eat. I mean, if you're having dinner, that's probably not emotional eating. But you can keep a log, which, just do on a 3x5 card and keep it with you. And when there is unstructured eating, make a note of the time and the place and, approximately what you're eating. It doesn't have to be in any great detail. And then how you're feeling. And then at the end of the week, kind of look and see what kind of patterns emerge. And maybe you have to do it for another week before a pattern emerges. But you'll find that there are some times of the day that are more likely, other times less likely, and some feelings more likely and others less likely. And you get a kind of a sense of what your unique pattern is.
Well, I think that's a great idea, but I'm also thinking it takes a very motivated, self-aware person to do it, to follow through, and to change it, and to follow up on this, and to really want to make the change. And one reason fad diets are so popular is because people want to put that onus on somebody else. Well, I followed this program and it worked, or it didn't work. Either way, it's not their responsibility.
Well, that's why the book's called Body Intelligence. I mean, it takes a certain amount of mental activity to do this. If you're just waiting for the magic pill to come along, or the miracle diet that will somehow do it for you without, any effort, you've got a long wait. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
There are many, many, many who believe that is just around the corner, that they won't have to work for it. And
well, the reality is that humans have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in which the food supply was very iffy, and so as a result, our prehistoric ancestors have many overlapping mechanisms that were designed to conserve energy. Fat is just stored energy.
Right.
And so that was very adaptive way back in prehistoric times, and maybe even up until 100, 150 years ago. But it's not adaptive now because food is not in short supply. We can get it whenever we want it. And so the idea that there's going to be a magic bullet that will take care of everything is probably a little unrealistic, because there just are so many different mechanisms that our body has to store energy that even if we targeted one or two of them, there still would be others that would make us very good at storing energy.
Now, I'm definitely in your camp of your way of thinking, and we run really parallel in this thought process. In fact, I'm not differing. I don't have any issues with anything you've said at all, except the practicality of helping people who are not yet into this line of thinking. Is there anything that you can say for somebody who's been a dieter and I call it a hobby dietist, and they're just not ready to take the onus on, but they're frustrated with where they are and where they've been, and how can I bring them over to our camp?
It's been estimated that we can cut down or reduce 200 calories a day without even noticing it. And, so again, it's going to take a little bit of effort, but if you look at how you eat, you probably can find 200 calories that you can cut back, and over time that will add up. It won't be overnight, but if you give up, a can of Coca-Cola, that's probably 150 or 160 calories right there. So
structural changes.
But again, it requires effort. There's, at least I'm not aware of any automatic, painless, effortless way of losing weight. If you know of one, let me know. I'd be happy to learn about it.
Now, what is your thought on some of these different, I hesitate to call them diets, but these different ways of eating, these different philosophies. So there's the paleo, and there's some of these other that are not strictly diets, but more of a philosophy or technique. There's the zone. There's some of these other ways that people eat for longevity rather than weight loss per se.
Yeah, well, that's a different issue. I mean, if we're just talking about health per se, independent of weight loss, probably the Mediterranean diet has the most empirical support for it. If we're talking about weight loss, truthfully, it probably doesn't make much difference. There was a professor, I think it was at Kansas State a few years ago, who lost weight on an 1,800 calorie a day diet, eating nothing but junk food.
Wow.
He had Twinkies and Snickers and potato chips, and that was his diet, but he only had 1,800 calories of them, and he lost weight. So, I don't think that there's any magic combination of foods that produces weight loss, but rather one thing that is definitely a factor is portion size. There's ample evidence that we just eat more than, say, our parents did or our grandparents did. We exercise less. We don't have to get out of the car to open the garage door,
right,
or get up from the sofa to change the channel. So we're expending fewer calories, but we're eating more. So I think the simplest thing to do is to cut back on portion size. I tell people that they should use salad plates for their dinner rather than dinner plates. And on an 8-inch plate, they'll get more than enough food, but it'll be less than if they serve themselves on a 12-inch plate.
Great idea. Yeah, I probably got that one from you, because I've been telling people that myself. I also like using the little tiny baby forks and spoons.
Yeah, there we go.
Because if the fork is tiny, there's only so much food you can put in your mouth at once.
Yeah, and I mean, it takes about 20 minutes between the time you start eating and leptin is released and signals your brain that you're not so hungry anymore. So anything you can do that slows the pace of eating means that you'll be satisfied having consumed fewer calories.
Very nice, very nice. I've been a fan of that myself. Now, Dr. Abramson, I'd like to switch gears a little bit here, and I know your latest book is called "It's Not Just Baby Fat: 10 Steps to Help Your Child to a Healthy Weight." Now, we both know that there's a huge amount of overweight children these days, and there wasn't so many 20, 30 years ago. Why do you think their weight has overall been increasing?
Oh, well, there are just a whole myriad of reasons why kids are getting fatter. The obvious one is, you look at how we eat. The proportion of family sit-down dinners is decreased. The proportion of drive-through fast food meals has increased. The amount of physical activity kids get, with their Game Boys, iPads, and et cetera, has decreased. The availability of gym classes in many school districts has decreased. There's the number of hours spent watching television has increased. There's ample evidence that the number of hours of screen time is positively correlated with BMI. The more time kids spend sitting, watching, the more likely it is that they're going to be fat.
And what is your book address? I mean, you obviously give some sort of background like you just did, and so your book talks to people about how they can help children, or can you give a little rundown on your...
Yeah, well, right. I mean, the one thing to recognize is that parents are in kind of a difficult spot, because on one hand, you don't want to watch your kid get fat, because not only are there health risks, but there are very real psychological consequences. Fat children are discriminated against and shunned in school. But on the other hand, sometimes putting a kid on a diet is really counterproductive. If you look at the history of, for instance, young women who have eating disorders, one of the things that is very common is that mom, who perhaps had her own weight issues, really made a big deal out of daughters eating, and as a result, after several years, the daughter develops an eating disorder. So on one hand, you want to be concerned and help the child to develop healthy eating habits, but on the other hand, if you're overly involved, that's a risk factor for an eating disorder. So it's a tough spot to be in if you're a parent. I tell parents to banish the word diet from their vocabulary. Instead, talk about healthy eating, and to not forbid any food. I mean, yes, Twinkies or potato chips or whatever, are junk foods, but by absolutely forbidding them, you increase their desirability. And then when the child does indulge, the likelihood of a binge is increased. Instead, I think we should tell kids that these are foods that we only eat on rare occasions, but it's not absolutely forbidden.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I have not read your book yet. It's not just baby fat, but I'm going to go out and buy it today, because I have two young children, a 6 and 8 year old, and the 8 is a girl, and so I'm hypersensitive to her relationship with food, and I'm doing my best with what I know so far to walk that thin line in the middle, not over or not underemphasize things, and I'm certainly not talking about weight. My focus is certainly on health. Good
for you. And girls do not need to hear their mothers being preoccupied with their own body issues.
Yeah, my wife is conscious of that as well, and so it's come up before, and I think it's great that you're putting that out there.
Yeah. Even if mom has weight concerns or is heavy, daughter still doesn't need to hear mom, obsess about, does this make my butt look big, or, how, what diet she's on or not on. The other thing is that parents need to model the appropriate behavior. So if you want your child to be active, you need to be active.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be, joining a gym or doing anything overly strenuous, but you can go for a walk with your child, or toss a ball around, or dance with your kid. But let the child see you being active and participating with, the child.
That's a great tip. That's great information. I do that with my kids as much as I can. We ran to the park over the weekend, and we did a bunch of pull-ups and push-ups and some other things, and played on the playground equipment, and then we had a nice walk back, and it was really a good time, and they got some play, and I got some exercise, and we all got to move around, and I think...
And it's kind of a bonding experience. The kids enjoy being with mommy and daddy, and doing something interesting.
I have a question that's not necessarily related to your... the book we've just been talking about, but what is your opinion on cheat meals or cheat days? I know some people talk about, oh, this is my cheat day or my cheat meal, and they use that as their carrot on the stick to get through the whole week, and then maybe on Saturday they eat whatever they want, all the stuff that's been forbidden the rest of the week. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, I have mixed feelings. I mean, I don't think that any food really should be forbidden. But if you want to, the foods that need to be limited, if you want to put them all on one day, I guess that's okay. But, there are ways of eating high calorically dense foods to minimize the damage. So that, for instance, a lot of people say that they crave chocolate or they really, 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 really like chocolate. And I will tell them, don't forbid it,
right,
but rather eat it as a dessert rather than as a snack. Eat it as a dessert. You're not hungry because you've just had your dinner. And there's some evidence that if you eat a desired food when you're not hungry, it will actually decrease the strength of future cravings. On the other hand, if you eat it when you're hungry, you'll tend to gobble it, so you'll eat more than you need, and you'll eat it faster than what makes sense. On the other hand, if you eat it for dessert, you can have a smaller portion and really focus on it and enjoy it. And get what you need out of the food, having consumed fewer calories.
Great advice. I love it. I love it. Now I want to shift gears a little bit. I have a couple of questions before we go that I'd like to ask you. First is, what's next for you?
I don't know.
Where are you headed? Do you have another book? Are you?
I have a proposal out, but we have to see if I get much response. I just did, I do a blog for Psych Today magazine, and I just put one up, so you can go to the psychologytoday.com website and look for It's Not Just Baby Fat.
Okay, I'll do that.
The one I just put up was about anorexia and bulimia in boys rather than in girls.
Okay, I will check that out, and I'll include a link to that in the show notes. Now, go ahead.
The other thing I do, which probably is not fitting for most of the audience, is I do continuing education workshops for therapists, nurses, pharmacists, dietitians, social workers, hospital administrators, etc. And this is so that they can get continuing ed credits to maintain their licenses. And I do this through an outfit called Institute for Natural Resources. And so if anyone is interested, they can go on their website. I'll be doing some in April.
Oh, great. Great. So a question that I ask everybody is, what keeps you motivated? And this is in regards relating to health and fitness and nutrition.
In terms of my own personal well-being, or in terms of my work and writing and professional activities?
No, your personal wellness, health, fitness activities. When you need to exercise, you need to eat well, or something that's betterment, and you're currently not doing it. What kicks you in the butt and gets you going?
Well, I much of my early life I was very sedentary, and at one point I joined a gym, and it was really hard. I didn't like going, but I persevered. And at this point, if I don't go to the gym after a week or so, I feel kind of weird. And so that motivates me to keep going. And, I kind of set goals for myself, and I go with a friend. And so, we spend, when I'm catching my breath, we catch up on, gossip and whatever else. So that keeps me motivated going to the gym. In terms of eating, as I said earlier, there's nothing that's off limits. And so I don't really feel deprived. I know that some days I can indulge more than other days, but I also know that I'm not getting any younger. I don't know anyone who is getting any younger. And my health is pretty important to me. I'm planning on being around for a while, and I'd like to be healthy for as long as I can. And so that keeps me going too.
Here. It's not just about longevity, it's about wellness.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't want to live a long life and be miserable and sick for the last, 15 or 20 years of it. I'd like to be healthy for however long I can.
So are you saying that you would like to live fit?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, Dr. Abramson, that's about all I have for you today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And
yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Have a great day.
You too.
Have a great holiday.
Okay, bye now.
Oh, what a great guy. Great interview, and I really appreciate him coming on here. He's a wealth of knowledge. It was really interesting to talk to him in person. Anyways, I have a question for you. This will be answered at the beginning of the next podcast in 1 week. How many men and women have emotional eating issues? Thanks again for listening. You can go to iTunes and leave a review, subscribe, or you may go to my website at livefitonline.net, where you can read the show notes, articles, and listen to these podcasts.
Thanks for listening to the Live Fit podcast. You can find us at livefitonline.net.